Good. I started running in the late 90s. I lived overseas and in Mexico, and I needed a way to stay active. And I knew another woman who was a runner, and I started running with her. I actually started walking first. And then I didn't think that I could ever run a marathon. Like, it just wasn't in my realm of possibilities. So I signed up to ride 100 miles instead. Somehow riding a bike seemed easier. And I joined with Team in Training to do that, and was with Team in Training for 3 years. And then after those 3 years, I remember thinking, well, I'm in the best shape that I ever possibly could be. So if I ever thought that I could run longer distance, now would be the time to do that. So I signed up thinking, like, let me just try, right? Let me just start, let me just try. And that's how I got started. I found my running shoes pretty quickly. I have really narrow heels. So I went to Fleet Feet, maybe tried 2 or 3 different pair, and then I stayed in those Adidas for a really long time. And when my physical therapist suggested that I switch shoes, I was really scared because I thought, I've been running in these same pair for a really long time, and she found me something very similar. I actually recently almost decided to work at Fleet Feet. I thought that'd be a great service to the community. And one of the reasons I decided not to do it was because it seemed like such a huge responsibility to fit people for shoes. It's so complex, and I didn't know if I could take that responsibility. So I decided not to take that job. Do I prefer to have a sports watch? Now, yes. That started when for a while I used to run walk, and my partner had a sports watch, and she would just automatically tell me when to run and when to walk. And I had trouble with that because I used to be a continuous runner. And then when she left, I decided to get a watch. But for a long time, I never really religiously paid attention to a Garmin or Uploaded or whatever. It actually was a joke with my friend Samantha and I, because we used to run pretty quickly back in the day, and women would show up to our weekly runs and ask us what pace we were running at, and we said we didn't know. And the woman said, well, you have a watch on. And I said, I know, but we don't pay attention. And she thought we were joking with her, sandbagging, or trying not to get her to run with us, but we just had fun. We had no idea it was a women's group. And we had both gotten a lot faster over that summer. So I think also that it seemed like we just didn't know what pace we were running. But I'm not super religious about speed or anything like that, or even logging my miles, I guess. So signing up for a race is really important. And so when I go to pick up a packet or pick up a t-shirt, there actually always is a little bit of doubt. I'm registered for this half in the end of March, and I haven't really been training, and it's just really putting your name on the line, whether or not you can do it. The t-shirts, I've gotten to the point where I don't want the t-shirts. I wish we could do it without the race and just donate the money or something. But there's something about actually, committing to whatever distance it is. Even if it's a 5K, then I'm nervous that I'm not going to run fast enough, right? Because 5Ks are faster. Even after 20 years, always still get a little excited. For me, staying hydrated is really important. If I'm dehydrated, I can't, I just find performance for everything is worse. So I try to stay continuously hydrated. I use Noon tabs. I try to keep it really simple, low sugar. I don't consume a lot of sugar in general. And I do a lot with just electrolytes, so making sure that I have a balance of them. So I'll also eat a banana, eat some salty snacks, that kind of thing, to make sure that hydration is really, just important to me in general. That's funny. If I carry a bottle, I'll carry it with me. This shows you how long I've been running. I've been running since before people had hydration belts, and I used to run fast enough that I could run to the water stop. So my limit used to be an hour. Unless I was running for an hour, I never carried water. And that was back before we had the really hot Chicago Marathon. There were 2 actually that were really hot, and that's when everybody started carrying them. But I was running in 20 years ago before people had hydration belts and all of that. So I actually typically don't carry something with me. But if I do, it's almost like handheld. I don't think I've ever run more than 5 miles on a treadmill, ever. I love the outside. I don't tend to sign up for really hot races, so nothing in Florida or anything like that. And then as far as cold, I usually draw the line when either my eyelashes freeze or the water in my water bottle freezes. So late February in Chicago, although it's been very, very mild this year, used to be kind of a time when I would take a little bit of time off because it was just too cold. I always prefer to run with people. I was supposed to run this morning and I didn't because it was just me. So I need like a time. I cannot explain why it is, but if I have to meet people for a run, it's just a better experience. It's like I get out of my own head because I'm showing up to meet other people. 2 weekends ago, I drove all the way up about 45 minutes to Libertyville to run with some people. And they were so fast I couldn't even stay with them, but I ran. I love the idea of meeting them, connecting, committing to running. And I was doing a favor for a friend. That's why I went up there. And then last weekend, I went to Madison to meet a group of women that I run with. And we didn't run that weekend, but just that idea of connection is so important to me. And that that's really comes first and foremost to the run. Cross training, I'll do just about anything. So I originally was a cyclist. And so for probably 15, almost 20 years, I would cycle and run always. Like I always did both of those pretty seriously. In the last couple of years, I've started to do CrossFit, and it's really given me a ton of strength and gotten me faster. So I like that. I also like rock climbing and anything outside as well. My favorite distance to run on a regular day would be 5 miles, right? Because I feel like you get in a good workout, you can do a little bit of speed work. If I just have a random time, 5 miles I like. There was a time when at any given time year round for several years, I could always run 10 miles. Like that was my goal. And I remember setting that is like, I want to be the person who no matter what can always run 10 miles. A lot of time has passed since then, but there was a time when that was just my regular. When if somebody said, yeah, 10 miles, I wouldn't even think about it. I was living in Argentina, and it was from a store called Carrefour. And my friend Bonnie, who was the first woman I had really met who had done a marathon, I'd met other men who had done them, suggested that we sign up for it. And so we did. And since it was in Argentina, it would have been in meters. I think it might have been an 8K or a 10K, I don't even remember. But that was the very first race I ever signed up for. It was great. It was very different because, again, we were in Argentina, so everything was kind of different and foreign to us. But that got me started. I tell Bonnie all the time, because we're actually still friends, that she's the reason that I became a runner, really, because seeing some other woman specifically, who had run a marathon, who kind of was like me, who we would run together, that put it in my mind, if she can do it, then I can do it. I don't keep track of my races or my miles or... Originally when I started running, it was very freeing because at the time I was a cyclist and it had a lot of responsibility. So I used to be a charity cycling coach for Team in Training, and the three of us coaches started coaching year round. And so when I would run, it just was about like just having fun, not worrying about the watch and whatnot. And so I never really kept track of it. I think I'm close to probably 50 half marathons at this point, but I've never really kept track of them. I know how long I've been running, that's about it. That's the only thing I can tell you. Longest distance I've run is a marathon, so 26.2 miles. Races always make me nervous. Like I always get kind of the dry heaves, always. I think even if they're shorter distances, something about it. I have a lot of physical challenges in my body, I think, that I, on a day-to-day basis, just manage. But for some reason, when I get in a race, it's like I start thinking about all those challenges that I navigate, and then you just don't know because you're kind of confined in a race. So I always get really nervous. Also in Chicago, when you run races, there's a lot of people. So I tend to get to races very early so that I can get ahead of all those people, and I don't have to worry about going to the bathroom before a race, grabbing what you need, putting your stuff away. I like to just be ahead of that and ahead of like all the crowds of people who are doing last minute things at the last minute, trying to get there before the start of a race. So I'd much rather be relaxed. So in general, I don't eat wheat if possible. And so if there's one thing as far as carb loading is to avoid wheat of any and all kind. I have a lot of digestive issues with my stomach. I've had major abdominal reconstruction. And so one of the ways that I manage that is by what I eat. And I did a lot of work with a nutritionist and a lot of work with having that tested. And so when I'm running, if I can be religious and strict about not eating wheat and usually most dairy, then it's much better for running. I always run with a flower. I run with fellow flowers, so you'll notice that I always have like a flower in my hair. I have 2 brands of socks that I wear. So Smart Wool socks or Belega are really, really important to me. And then for my bottoms, I actually run in Athleta bottom. Oh my gosh, memories from a race, they all have it. I can't think of a race I guess I'll go with the most recent. So in September, I went to run a half in Wisconsin, and I was connecting with my female friends who live there. And I started with our friend Deer. She was running a shorter distance than I was, so I connected with her. And we just talked the whole way. I can't tell you how fast we ran or anything like that, but I just really wanted to get to spend time with her. And she had made the effort to get her 2 young kids, her husband in the car to get ready to the race. I didn't know if I'd be able to see her before we started, and we did half the race together. And then after she was done, so Deer stopped her distance or finished her distance, and I kept going, I ran into another woman during the race. And she had been going through something very, very difficult, actually, as had I. And so we just talked about it, like the whole rest of the race. And for me, that connection, there's something very different about connecting with someone when you are in motion. I think, actually I know the science, that it calms the rest of your body. So instead of talking about something very traumatic or very difficult that makes the matters worse, where you might get like overwhelmed, doing it when you're on the run, somehow it just seems actionable, right? That you're able to go forward through it. And I know that from when I've not been able to run, because if you're not able to keep going forward and keep able to like be in motion, then it feels very paralyzing. So for me, I actually, that's another one. In 2015, I was going through chemo again, so I have had cancer twice, and I decided to show up to the marathon training for our team in training. And I could just walk at the time. I wasn't allowed to run. I'd had some reconstructive surgery on my leg, and I walked. And that is the healthiest thing, right? Of being like, hey, I've been through chemo, I have all of these things going on, but I can still, it's like being a kid, right? You can still join in on everybody playing the game, you're not benched, and being able to just walk and move. And I wanted to do what they did. Like I wanted to still run hills and still run the long distance. I still feel that way. But to actually be there, it's very, very calming in a way that I cannot explain. Much more so than just sitting around and having a conversation. So, yeah. Have I met people running that have become my friend? Oh yeah, that's all my friends. Yeah, I'm trying to think of if during a race, I'll talk to anybody during a race. I'm normally pretty inhibited and introverted a little bit, but there's something about either the Chicago lakefront or being in a race where I just kind of want to talk to people. I also used to run with team in training for a long time, and we wear these purple singlets, and I know that I ran races almost exclusively in those singlets for probably 15 years. And that gives you a connection, like, because it's a nationwide, actually international group. And so you always will shout out to someone like Go Team or start talking to them or whatnot. I think the most memorable instance of meeting someone during a race is 2 years ago. I ran Seattle, or maybe 3 years ago now, the half. And all my friends were running the full, so I was the only one running a half. And there was a gentleman next to me pushing a young man in a chair. And they were doing the race together, both of them as an athlete. And so I was amazed that here this man, who's I think 20 years older than I am, is pushing another individual in the race. They're doing the full, and there's another woman running with him. And I learned their story. He's actually the world record holder for pushing, doing a race with someone. He's run all these amazing ultras. And we got some pictures together. A friend of mine always takes pictures. So I am now friends with that woman. Her name is Larissa. She lives in Seattle. We're friends on Facebook. I'll probably go back to Seattle and see her. She knows other friends of mine. And Peter, I have since seen in many other races. He actually came in the Chicago Marathon this year and 2 years ago, back with the young man Jackson, and I saw him there as well. So I met them during that race. And then we had to get them up a hill that was really almost insurmountable. So that's just one example. So I meet people running all the time. I just like the fact that people are out there cheering. I mean, when you think about it, think about yourself as a grown adult. When do you stand around and cheer for other people who you actually know? So not professional athletes. I mean, I know I don't follow professional sports like other professional sports like NFL, NBA, all that stuff. But the notion that you're cheering just for another person and you want the best from them. So I really love it all. I love the creativity. I love the kids coming out in costumes. The fact, actually it's the small races. I did a race in Marquette, and it's a small town up in the UP, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and the whole town came out to support that race, right? And it's really simple, right? It's just showing up for another individual and cheering them on. That to me, I think is really, is really amazing. I do like the humor. I like the creativity. I like that we get to see other people's creativity with some of the signs. I think it's a really good sign when, a sign just makes you laugh and whatnot, like what appeals to people or doesn't. My friends and I actually went out to Boston a couple years ago, and Boston is very serious when they cheer for the race. They're very old school. My friends and I are not very serious. So that was really funny. We got a lot of pictures of that. People will give you hugs when they're running. I have a picture of a man in a silver suit giving me a hug in the middle of the Boston Marathon. So that to me is really, really funny. The fact that it gives you like no restrictions on connecting with people. I think during a time when we are very not willing to connect with each other, right? So you're out there and you can like talk to people and say hi and actually like give them a hug in the middle of the race, that kind of thing. So it's a way to connect. I would like to run another marathon. I haven't run a marathon in like 10 years. I've stuck to halves for a variety of reasons, but I think that would be amazing. Like I would like to do a distance again where I'm not sure if I can. I do a lot of self-care when I did a lot of races. I always used to go for a massage, and given the choice, I would always go for a massage before rather than after, because it actually helps your race and is more therapeutic when you're tapering. So I guess that would be the one thing that I would do. It takes a lot for me to be able to run. So race recovery. If I do long distance, I am known for taking cold showers or cold ice baths. I really am a proponent of that. There were 2 years where my 17-mile run or my 18-mile run were the same day that I moved. But big mistake. Did it twice. But so those days I would like take an ice bath, and it really rejuvenates you and regenerates you. But in terms of self-care, I do a lot of things. I've had a lot of surgeries for cancer treatment, and so in order for my body to stay moving, there's a lot of things I have to do, like yoga and dynamic movement, and I do a lot of work with my feet and things, and those aren't specific to races. They're just so that I can keep moving. And I'm very, very strict about what I eat. So I don't eat a lot of sugar of any kind. I don't eat a lot of processed foods. I think that has a big impact on your ability to recover as well. Yeah. Why did I start running? I started running with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. That really was it. My brother is a cancer survivor. I had lost somebody to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I actually, to be very honest, I needed to find a way to grieve. I think I needed to find a way to not having lost someone and just have it be silent. That's a cultural thing for me, that in Mexican communities, you always celebrate and bring forward the person that you've lost. If any of you have seen the movie Coco or Day of the Dead, right? This notion of, you welcome someone who's passed into your home once a year. And that's really what I needed to be able to do. I had this person that I lost very, very young. I had watched my brother battle something very, very serious, although he's now fine. And I needed to find a way to really honor that moving forward. And Team in Training does that. I think being with everybody there, you don't always talk about what you've gone through or how difficult it is, but there's a different level of person with Team in Training. And it almost most often is a tacit understanding, right? We don't say that. It's a silent thing. And the other funny thing is, I have been on the run where I'm running with 8 people and like 7 of them are cancer survivors. And this was even before I got sick. And the reason that matters is because you are seeing a group of people who are thriving after cancer. And, normally in the media, cancer is this tragic and very terrible and life-threatening thing. And it is. And, I just actually lost a friend to cancer recently. But you don't see the other side, right? You don't see the fact that for acute leukemia, which is what my brother had, the survival rates for that are 90% today, like close to 90%, right? So you need, if someone was a parent or a sibling or whatever, you need to know that it can be awful, but it also can be awesome, right? And it can be both of those things. And for me, Team in Training is always those two things, right? That you don't have to hide how scary it is or what you've lost or what you're going through. You are doing that and, these other things. I know, cancer survivors who have done 20 marathons or whatever distance or whatnot, in addition to having all of those, scary side effects and whatnot. It's not a stopping point, it becomes a starting point. Do you want me to talk more about the why? No, I can.
Wow.
So I was a coach for Team in Training for a long time, and I also was a spin instructor. And what for me was so powerful about that is this idea that if you say to somebody, oh, you could run a 5K or you could run whatever distance, insert whatever thing seems impossible, when you sign up for a race and you actually commit to doing that, suddenly it is possible, right? We used to say this thing when I was recruiting people to sign up for Team in Training, that you are never more ready than you are right now, right? If you don't sign up today, and we got so many people to sign up by telling them this, it's so funny, because it works, which is that if you're waiting for, 6 months from now, I will have completed X, Y, and Z, and then I will be ready, right? Or I'll lose 30 pounds and then I'll be ready. It's like, no, well, why don't you start today, and why don't I do it with you? Right? So if your goal is to run a marathon one day, I don't recommend that you sign up for a marathon immediately if you haven't done anything. But what step could we take right now to get you closer to doing that? And let's start right now, right where we are. So when people say, I cannot run or I couldn't do that, I think it's about finding out what you could do. And again, it is possible that running is perhaps not the best, form of movement for someone. But could you set a goal, or could you do something that is similar and stay connected to your group of friends, in this case, our group that we have, through that process? Because that's really what it's about, right? Is having that connection and having that accountability to move yourself forward. So when people say that, and I think that's the other joy, right, is knowing that there was this point when I would be coaching people on the bike where you could see it click that they figured out that they were going to cross that finish line. Right? Where there's always a little doubt. And I used to have that running a marathon, right? I mean, people say, yeah, I could crawl across it or whatever, but I mean, where you really know, right? And for some people, especially if you're running a marathon, it's only when you see the finish line, right, where you know that you're really gonna cross it. But for other people, they have a horrible thing at mile 15 or something, and as soon as they get into 20, and then you only have 6 miles left, they know. But whenever that happens, that doubt changing to, yes, I know I can cross that finish line without any question, is really, really important. And you never know. A friend of mine she's run Chicago, I think 10 times now. She's run, I don't know how many marathons, and Chicago was cold this year for the marathon. So when she was running, she got really dehydrated. And just after she saw me, she had these horrible cramps in her legs, like she's never ever had before, because the conditions were different. So in that moment, she didn't know if she was gonna finish the race. A seasoned runner. She's been running for 20 years. She's done the Chicago Marathon a ton of times, and she made it across. So that's a very significant thing, right? That whole notion of, I had these unexpected challenges that I had no idea of for something like the weather that you can't control, but she found a way to figure it out in that moment. I think the thing about signing up for a race is you don't know. You sign up and you think it's one thing. It's like life, right? But you are committed. So let's say you sign up to ride 100 miles in California in June. You don't know that means that in February in Chicago, you're going to have to be riding outside, and March, and it's still cold, and April and May. We've had seasons where people never wear shorts, like the whole season, because you've never been outside on your bike at 7 a.m. before. You only have been outside at 1 p.m. when it's nice and sunny and warm. And so I think that whole idea that you have to do things even that you don't want to. And I used to coach a lot of people who were parents. So one of the things is that I encountered a lot of individuals who were putting so many other people ahead of themselves. And it's very selfish in some respects, or self-focused, to train for a race. We have a lot of friends who, young women who've had children, and now they're doing this thing for themselves, and suddenly they're putting the time, the effort, the attention on themselves and their own personal growth. And I think that that's also really incredibly healthy as well. And as far as encouraging people or helping people with that, it's setting small challenges. So you break it down, like, can you get to this mailbox? Can we do the next 5 miles? Can we do the next mile? Instead of focusing on kind of the long game. You never think about like, oh, if 12 miles was so hard, how am I ever gonna run 20? That's a really bad thing to think about. You think about, okay, could I run 12 and a half, right? and just kind of keep going. So I was 27 when I first became a coach for Team in Training. At the time, give you a little background, I was a high school teacher, and I also was already a spin instructor. And I think more than anything, I just saw a need in the community. Team in Training coaches really aren't about, being fast and, setting some kind of speed records. When I was younger, I was much faster, for sure. But the thing for me with coaching, I still have, Nike used to be a sponsor for Team in Training, and we got these Nike jackets, which were very, very nice jackets. But my dog ate a hole in the pocket of the jacket. I wore the jacket so much. But we got these jackets that say Team in Training. They say coach on them. I have trouble letting that jacket go. I moved 2 years ago, and I had this collection of my coaching items because I was so proud of owning those items. The jacket I mentioned that had the hole in the pocket. In fact, I left it. We got together to go bowling a couple of years ago, and I left it there. And I thought, oh my God, if I lost this item, there's just not, I would be so proud to be a coach for Team in Training, because it is always about individuals pushing themselves in a way and doing something to, carry other people who are battling cancer at the same time. It's a very unique, different group of people who are part of that organization. And so, yeah, that's just being a coach with them for so long is one of the most proud things I've ever done. It requires a very, very high level of sacrifice, though, to be able to do that. And so I also think that it's an amazing opportunity. It's something I'm very, very grateful for, but it also requires a lot of sacrifice. And I say that for the other coaches who have been my coaches when I was a participant, right? I also appreciate it there because you're never putting yourself first. You're always putting the participant first. And all sorts of things happen. I like to think I come very prepared as a runner and a cyclist, but not everybody does. There's people in all sorts of levels of training and levels of life. Yeah, and you never know, no matter where somebody is at. And sort of jokingly, I've had people show up in jeans, right, for a bike ride, or I've had, it just seems really funny, or for a run or something like that, or people who have never thought about nutrition before at all, right? And you're training them to run a marathon. So those kinds of things. And again, I was only a cycling coach, but I kind of have some perspective because I know a lot of the marathon coaches too. But you always you're there to help somebody no matter what level it is that they're at. Yeah. People who have been with me throughout this journey, there's an army of people who have been with me throughout this journey. Yeah. I started in 2001 with Team in Training. Yeah. And I've had people show up for me in ways I cannot even, it's unfathomable, the things that I could tell you. We would need to have a whole other story just about those people. I could go through them. One of the things that I'm very fortunate of is the first 10 years that I spent cycling with Team in Training, I had the same core of people. So there was a group of 15 people who came back season after season after season and never wavered. And a lot of them are still friends, even though the cycle team doesn't function in the same way that it did. Actually, some of those participants are now the coaches, which is interesting. They've come back, one raised a daughter and different things have happened. Actually, in the fall, in November, I went to a dinner for the Girls on the Run. A young woman that I met through Team in Training is on the board here at Girls on the Run. And she asked me if I knew someone. She said, we've always been looking for someone who's had the whole impact of Girls on the Run long term. And I told her that my friend KC, who was one of the first people I ever met with Team in Training in 2001, who was not a cyclist or not an athlete at the time, that her daughter, who then was 4, joined Girls on the Run, started running. It changed her life. She became a college athlete. And Emma actually was speaking there at the Girls on the Run event. So what is that, 20 years later? So that's 4 women, right? 2 women who I met through Team in Training, one who was a young 4-year-old and is now, a grown woman and a coach in her own right, all coming together and empowering other women to do that, right? So Jen was running the Girls on the Run event. KC has raised 3 amazing, young, powerful women. And then we had her daughter who was speaking and talking about her experiences, right? So that kind of growth and legacy is something that I've been able to be a part of through Team in Training. And I've seen it other places. It ignited something in me. But people who run marathons and people who run marathons for Team in Training show up, right? You know the friend of yours who says, oh, I'll help you move, and they just say it because it's like a platitude. It's like maybe they're Southern and they're just like, they just say, okay, I'll help, and they don't really, and I mean, sorry, not people from the South, but I have a coworker who talks about that pleasantry all the time. But the whole point is that when you know what it takes to go through a marathon, when you know what it takes to raise thousands of dollars while doing that, you are a person who is committed to showing up when someone needs it. And there also is this commonality of people who, they know what it takes to get through chemotherapy or something like that. I have hundreds of these people. I actually, when I was done with chemo, I threw a huge party and invited all of those people to celebrate when I was done. And that it was all Team in Training people who were there. Yeah. The one thing, and I do a lot of public speaking. It's kind of become my thing. I don't know. I like talking to people about my experiences and helping other people. But I always make this joke that I never took gym in high school. So I was not an athlete at all. And in my family, that definitely was a point of difficulty because my dad was a PE teacher and always wanted me to be active. So I just never felt confident like in any athletic sport or anything like that. It just wasn't something that I chose. And so I think if somebody were to see me now, they wouldn't know what it was like when I started, right? And now they everybody thinks I'm an athlete, and I am an athlete. I've been doing things for 20 to 25 years. But I also want to honor who I was when I first started and what it took to cross that first finish line, and how crazy it was to say that I would raise $4,000 while riding 100 miles for the very first time, while I was doing like my first year on my first job of teaching, or my second job of teaching. So I think if somebody's sitting there saying like, oh, I don't know if I could do this or whatnot, or if you've become this, uber ultra runner or whatever it is, or you're about to do your second marathon, I think really honoring that change in yourself, like how far you've come, I think that's really, really important. And I also think with surviving cancer twice, what it took to get back to being able to be active was not an easy thing. And I, in my own accord, don't honor that path of how much it took to be able to do that. I will tell you that I have some ongoing health concerns now, and the only thing that I can do is keep myself as healthy as possible, right? Because I can't control like the cells dividing in my body and the outcomes on those aspects, but I can control all the other aspects of my body and my mind, right? Like, you get comfortable with being uncomfortable when you're a runner. We talked about extreme conditions and temperature and all this other stuff, and so it just readies you for whatever's next. So you're talking about mile 23. So in 2015, I had cancer for the second time, and I had when you have bone cancer, chemo kicks your butt. And then I'd had this reconstructive surgery where I thought I might not be able to run again. The doctors thought I would, but I just had some questions. And so that year, I decided to go out to mile 23 because I had planned to run that marathon. I had thought, well, I'm going to get back to marathoning. And I had signed up for 10 races. And I was so pissed that I, one, had to get my money back, and two, couldn't run them, that I went out to mile 23 to cheer for people. Now, I go to mile 23 because I don't like the crowds of the marathon, and I like to be seen. So I want to be able to see people, and I know that mile 23 is very difficult. And so I went out there just to have fun. Like, again, it's like a party, right? And so I had gone there years before, but I was so excited that year to see people that I knew running the marathon, and really to be alive, to be honest, and healthy, that things kind of got out of hand. Like, I started jumping in and running with people. I got in a lot of photos with people. My friends got married that year during the marathon. My friend went viral on social media and the news that year because he wrote some stuff while he was running. My friend dressed up as a Teletubby. She didn't run the marathon, but that just made it hilarious. Like, there were so many things that happened in that year. And 10 of my friends were running that year, and they had orange flowers, and because they were running for me, because one friend just raised money for Team in Training they were running basically because I couldn't. And so, yeah, that year I go almost every year to mile 23 now and cheer for the marathon. And it's amazing. I mean, I would love to run another marathon. I just don't know if it's the best thing for my health. So the next best thing to that is standing out there and cheering. And it's really fun. It's like a challenge too, to see how many people we can see, if I can see them. It's really fun. I actually ran into my running partner that year, and I've run into him twice since. From 2005, we ran a marathon together. I haven't seen him since. And I ran into him at mile 23 of the Chicago Marathon that year. Yeah. And he's not on social media. I've tried. I can't find him. But I could find him in a sea of 35,000 runners running down the street. So again, it's one of those things that are awful and also like a gift that comes with them, which is, I think all of the things that I've been through have given me like a lens on being able to sort of drill down or distill, because I'm a chemist, distill into what is like most important, and also to be able to iterate that, right? I don't have some of like the normal constraints on life that people do, and so it just really gives me a lens, I guess, into what's most important. And I will say that I also got that from my older brother. He was very, very sick when he was a teenager, and so he also had that very young, right? This ability to really like focus in on what was most important. And so thank you. I think that's where that comes from. So